What was he doing here? She hadn't known Antonio was in Shiloh Springs. Last she heard, he'd headed back to Dallas after everything calmed down with the whole Rafe and Tessa scandal, a fiasco which nearly ended up killing the schoolteacher and the county sheriff. Fortunately, things worked out and they were blissfully happy. She wouldn't be surprised if there weren't wedding bells in their future. "Antonio, you startled me." She straightened, holding up the keys. "A case of Butterfingers. I'm late for an appointment." His dark eyes studied her intently, and she ducked her head, refusing to meet his direct stare. Sharp as a tack and adept at reading people better than anybody she knew, she didn't dare let on anything was amiss. He'd get suspicious and go into Mr. FBI agent mode, sticking his nose into her business. It was the last thing she could afford to happen now. Not when she stood on the brink of her whole world imploding. "Okay." He drawled out the word, still watching her closely, a tiny smile playing on his lips. "Thought I'd stop by and say hello. I'm headed to Austin. The Dallas office is loaning me out to help on a case because they're short-staffed. I don't mind. It gives me a chance to be a little closer to home, which is always nice." "That's great. I'm sure Douglas and Miss Patty will love your being able to visit more often." She pressed the button on the key fob, unlocking the door, and pulled it open, tossing her bag onto the passenger seat. "Sorry, I've got to go. My client is waiting for me." "Of course. I'll see you later." He stepped back, making room for her to inch past him. Her shoulder brushed his arm as she scooted past, and her breath caught in her throat. Why did this have to happen now? Antonio's finally going to be around Shiloh Springs more, which is what I've always wanted. And I've got to run. Again. As she drove away, her gaze strayed to the rearview mirror. Antonio stood still as a statue in the parking lot, his eyes watching her, his expression serious yet unreadable. She kept her eyes glued to him, silhouetted in the mirror until he disappeared from view, trying to memorize the sight. One last memory of the man who'd fascinated her from the moment they'd met. Another regret to add to the list of things she wished she could change. Swallowing back a sigh, she headed for her townhouse to pack.
Antonio stared as the car pulled away, arms crossed over his chest. Well, that had been strange. Nothing about his encounter with Serena felt normal. She'd been flustered and jumpy, almost skittish. Not the woman he'd known for almost a year. Tugging on the brim of his cowboy hat, he debated going into the real estate office and saying hello to his mother. He'd be lying if he said the only reason he'd stopped by Boudreau Realty had been to visit with family. Catching a glimpse of the dark-haired beauty who'd skedaddled away as though her tail was on fire might have played a significant part in his detour. Glancing at his watch, he realized it was later than he thought. He'd have to call his mama from the road because he needed to check in with the Austin office before the end of the day and get a quick briefing on the case he'd been working. Come morning, he could hit the ground running. He'd been feeling stifled in Dallas, the big city closing in on him, suffocating any pleasure he got from doing the job he'd always loved. It hadn't taken him long to realize he wasn't meant for big city living, but once there, he'd been kinda stuck. Maybe this change of location, being a lot closer to Shiloh Springs and his family, could help him make the hard decisions about his life and what he wanted to do with it. With one last look in the direction Serena had driven away, he shook his head and climbed into his car. Figuring her out would have to wait. He had a job to do.